Daniel Carter did not want to be here. He stood at the entrance of the Grand Hall of the Volanthi Empire, looking at thousands of seats filled with the most important beings in the galaxy. There were creatures of all shapes and sizes. Some had 4 arms. Some had skin that glowed blue. Some floated in the air because they had no legs. And here he was, a simple communications officer from Earth, wearing a uniform that did not quite fit. 3 days ago, Daniel had been doing his normal job on the human ship called the Morning Star. He checked signals. He fixed broken radio equipment. He drank bad coffee and counted the days until his contract ended. It was boring work, but Daniel liked boring. Boring was safe. Boring was predictable. Then the Tyrellian flu hit the ship. Captain Williams got sick first. Then Commander Lopez. Then Chief Diplomat Martha Green, the woman who was supposed to attend the coronation ceremony. One by one, the senior officers fell ill until there was no one left who could represent humanity at the most important political event of the decade. No one except Daniel Carter. You will go. Admiral Chun had said through the video screen, her face showing no room for argument. Earth has been given 3 seats at this ceremony. We cannot waste them. We cannot insult the Volanthi by sending no one. But Admiral, I am just a communications officer. I know nothing about diplomacy. Then sit quietly and do not speak. Smile. Clap when others clap. That is all I ask. And so Daniel found himself standing at the entrance of a hall bigger than any building he had ever seen on Earth. The ceiling was so high that clouds actually formed near the top. The walls were made of crystal that shifted colors every few seconds. The floor beneath his feet was warm, as if the building itself was alive. He looked at the seating chart that had been given to him. Humanity's seats were near the front, close to the ceremonial stage where the new queen would be crowned. They were good seats. Important seats. Seats meant for important people. Daniel was not an important person. He started walking down the main aisle, his boots making sounds against the floor that seemed too loud in the quiet hall. Beings turned to look at him. A tall creature with eyes all over its head stared at him without blinking. A small group of what looked like intelligent plants rustled their leaves as he passed. Daniel kept his eyes forward and tried not to trip over his own feet. When he reached the human section, he saw that the other 2 seats were empty. Of course, they were. He was the only human representative at the coronation of the most powerful monarch in the known galaxy. No pressure at all. Daniel looked at the seats. They were beautiful, carved from something that looked like marble, but felt like silk when he touched it. A small screen in front of each seat showed translations of everything being said. The Volanthi had thought of everything, but Daniel did not want to sit in the front. He looked around the hall and saw that the back sections were mostly empty. Most species wanted to be close to the action, to be seen, to make their presence known. The back and side areas were for those who did not matter, or those who did not want to be noticed. Daniel walked away from his assigned seat. He found a spot on the far right side of the hall, almost in the corner where no one would pay attention to him. The seat was simple, without the decorations of the important sections. It was perfect. He sat down and let out a breath. He did not know he had been holding around him. The hall continued to fill with beings from across the galaxy. He heard languages he could not identify, saw colors he had no names for, smelled things that were both wonderful and terrible at the same time. It was overwhelming, but from his corner seat, Daniel could watch it all without being part of it. Then the lights changed. The entire hall became darker except for a path of golden light that led from the main entrance to the ceremonial stage. Music began to play, but it was not like any music Daniel had ever heard. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, vibrating through his bones, making his heart beat in a different rhythm. The Volanthi royal procession had begun. First came the guards. Tall and silver-skinned, their armor reflecting the golden light. They moved in perfect formation, their steps matching the rhythm of the music. Behind them came the nobles, dressed in robes of every color, their heads held high with pride and history. And then came the queen. Daniel had seen pictures of Seraphina Vale, of course. Every news channel in the galaxy had been talking about her for months. She was young for a Volanti monarch, only 300 years old, which was like being 30 for a human. Her mother had died unexpectedly, and now she would take the throne. But pictures did not prepare Daniel for seeing her in person. She was tall, like all Volanti, with silver skin that seemed to glow from within. Her hair was dark purple, almost black, and it floated around her head as if she was underwater. Her eyes were violet, the color of a sunset on a world with two suns. She wore white robes that trailed behind her for what seemed like miles, and on her face was an expression that Daniel could not quite read. She looked powerful. She looked ancient. She looked afraid. Daniel understood that look. It was the look of someone who had to pretend to be strong when they felt weak inside. He had worn that look himself many times. The procession moved forward, and Daniel watched with everyone else. The queen walked with perfect grace, her steps matching the music, her eyes fixed on the throne ahead. Everything was going according to plan. Then she stopped. The music continued, but the queen was no longer moving. The guards behind her nearly walked into her before they caught themselves. The nobles stumbled and looked confused. A whisper of concern went through the crowd. Daniel saw the queen turn her head slowly, scanning the assembled beings. She was looking for something, or someone. Her violet eyes passed over the noble sections. They passed over the diplomatic areas. They passed over the front rows where humanity's empty seats waited. And then they found Daniel. For one terrible moment, Daniel felt those ancient eyes looking directly at him. He stopped breathing. He wanted to look away, but he could not move. It was like being caught in a spotlight that could see inside your soul. The queen smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but Daniel saw it clearly. Then she changed direction. Instead of walking toward the throne, she walked toward the side of the hall, toward the corner, toward Daniel. The entire hall went silent. Beings who had been whispering went quiet. Cameras that had been focused on the throne swiveled to follow the queen. Something was happening that was not supposed to happen. The queen walked up the steps to Daniel's section. She walked past empty seats and confused beings who bowed quickly as she passed. She walked until she stood directly in front of the simple seat next to Daniel's, and then, without a word, she sat down. Daniel turned to look at her. She turned to look at him. Up close, she was even more beautiful and even more terrifying. "You look lonely," she said, her voice soft and warm. Daniel forgot every word he had ever known. The silence in the grand hall was so complete that Daniel could hear his own heart beating. Every being in the room was staring at them. Thousands of eyes, sensors, and other organs that Daniel could not name were all focused. On the corner where the future queen of the Volanti Empire had chosen to sit, next to a human communications officer, Daniel finally remembered how to speak. "Your Majesty, I think you have made a mistake." "I do not make mistakes," Seraphina replied. Her voice was calm, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. "I make choices, and I have chosen to sit here. But the ceremony, your throne, everyone is waiting. Let them wait." She adjusted her robes and looked out at the confused crowd. "They've been waiting for me to take the crown for 3 months. A few more minutes will not hurt them." Daniel did not know what to say. In all his training, in all his years of service, no one had ever prepared him for a conversation with a queen. He was good at fixing broken equipment. He was good at finding weak signals in the noise of space. He was not good at talking to royalty. "May I ask why you are here?" he managed to say. I told you. You looked lonely. That cannot be the only reason. Serafina turned to look at him directly. Her violet eyes seemed to see through his skin and into his thoughts. Daniel had never felt so exposed in his life. You are clever for a human, she said. Yes, there is another reason. May I tell you a secret? Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. I am afraid. She said the words quietly, so only he could hear. I have been trained for this day since I was born. I know every word of the ceremony. I know every step I must take, every gesture I must make. But standing at the entrance, looking at all these beings who expect me to be perfect, I felt my courage leave me. I do not understand, Daniel said. You are a queen. What could you be afraid of? Everything. She laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. I am afraid of failing my people. I am afraid of making the wrong choices. I am afraid of being alone on a throne that has broken stronger rulers than me. Daniel thought about her words. He thought about his own fear when Admiral Chun had ordered him to come here. He thought about how he had run to the corner to hide, just like she was hiding now. I am afraid too, he said finally. I am afraid of being here, of saying the wrong thing, of embarrassing my species. I am just a communications officer. I fix machines. I am not supposed to be talking to queens. And yet here you are, and yet here I am. They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the whispers had started again. Daniel could see officials in fancy robes moving toward them, their faces showing panic. The ceremony was falling apart, and no one knew what to do. Tell me about yourself, Serafina said suddenly. Tell me something true. What do you want to know? Anything. I have spent my whole life surrounded by people who tell me what they think I want to hear. For once, I want to hear what someone actually thinks. Daniel considered her request. He could tell her something safe, something boring. But she had asked for truth, and something about her eyes made him want to give it. I never wanted to join the space fleet, he said. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to stay on Earth and teach children about history. But my family was poor, and the fleet paid for education. So I signed up, thinking I would serve my years and then go home. But you did not go home. No, I kept extending my contract. One more year, I would tell myself. Just one more. And then one more after that. I think I was afraid to go back. Afraid that the world had moved on without me, that there was no place for me anymore. Serafina nodded slowly. You were afraid of being alone too. I suppose I was. Then we have something in common, Daniel Carter. She said his name carefully, as if tasting each syllable. We are both afraid. We are both far from where we thought we would be. And we are both sitting in chairs we did not expect to sit in. A tall Valanti official had finally reached them. He bowed so low that his forehead touched the floor. Your Majesty, I beg you, the ceremony must continue. The Council is concerned. The other species are confused. Please, return to your place. Serafina did not look at him. Her eyes stayed on Daniel. Tell me, human, what do your people do when they are afraid? Daniel thought about the question. He thought about human history, about all the times his species had faced fear and somehow found a way through it. We hold on to something, he said. A memory, a person, a hope for the future. We remind ourselves that we are not alone, that others have faced the same fear and survived. And then we take one step, just one, and then another, one step at a time. Yes, that is how humans survive. Not by being brave all at once, but by being brave enough for just one more step. Serafina was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up, and the official nearly collapsed with relief. But instead of walking toward the throne, she extended her hand toward Daniel. Walk with me, she said. What? You said humans hold on to something when they are afraid. I am asking you to be my something. Walk with me to the throne. Help me take those steps. Your Majesty, I cannot. The protocol. Your people will not accept it. My people will accept what I tell them to accept. That is what it means to be queen. She kept her hand extended. Will you help me, Daniel Carter? Will you help a frightened girl become a queen? Daniel looked at her hand. He looked at the thousands of beings watching them. He looked at the throne waiting in the distance, heavy with history and expectation. Then he took her hand. Her skin was cool and smooth, like polished metal, but somehow also warm. She smiled at him, and this time the smile reached her eyes. Thank you, she said, that they began to walk. The crowd parted before them. Officials scrambled to reorganize the ceremony. Musicians who had stopped playing started again, though their timing was confused. Nothing was going according to plan, and yet everything felt right as they walked. Seraphina spoke quietly so only Daniel could hear. I have watched humanity for many years. Your species is young, barely a moment in galactic time. And yet, you have done things that older species thought impossible. You have spread across the stars in a single generation. You have made peace with enemies and war with friends. You have failed and failed and failed, and yet you keep trying. We do not know how to give up, Daniel admitted. It is both our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. I want to learn that from you. How to fail and keep trying. How to be afraid and keep moving. The Volanthi have ruled for 10,000 years, and we have forgotten how to hope. We have grown tired and careful. We expect nothing new because we have seen everything before. They were approaching the throne now. It was massive, carved from a single piece of black crystal that seemed to absorb the light around it. The crown sat on a cushion beside it, waiting for a head to rest upon. And what do you hope for? Daniel asked. Seraphina stopped at the base of the steps that led to the throne. She turned to face him, still holding his hand. I hope to be different. I hope to be a queen who changes things instead of preserving them. I hope to build bridges between species instead of walls. She squeezed his hand. And I hope that the human who held my hand on this day will not forget me. I do not think that will be possible, Daniel said honestly. She laughed, and this time the sound was real and warm. Good, because I do not intend to let you go, Daniel Carter. You are the first honest person I have met in 300 years. I will have need of such honesty in the years to come. She released his hand and began to climb the steps alone. But before she reached the top, she turned back one more time. Stay, she said. Watch me become a queen, and when the ceremony is over, find me. We have more to discuss. Then she turned, walked to the throne, and sat down. The crown was placed upon her head. Words were spoken in the ancient Volanthi language. Light filled the hall, and music shook the walls. And beings from across the galaxy bowed before the new ruler of the most powerful empire in known space. But through it all, Queen Seraphina Vale kept, her violet eyes fixed on a human communications officer standing alone in the crowd. And Daniel Carter, who had wanted only to disappear, found that he could not look away. 3 weeks had passed since the coronation, and Daniel Carter was still on the Volanthi homeworld. He had tried to leave. After the ceremony, he had gone back to his ship, packed his small bag, and prepared to return to his normal life. But before the morning star could depart, a message arrived from the royal palace. The queen requests your presence, the message said. Immediately, Daniel had expected a brief meeting. Perhaps she wanted to thank him properly for helping her that day. Perhaps she wanted to make sure he would not tell embarrassing stories about her moment of fear. Whatever the reason, he thought it would take an hour at most. That was 3 weeks ago. Now Daniel lived in a guest room in the royal palace. A room bigger than his entire apartment on Earth. Every morning, a servant brought him food he could not identify, but which tasted wonderful. Every afternoon, He met with the Queen in her private study, and every evening he lay awake wondering how his life had become so strange. "You are uncomfortable," Serafina said on the 21st day. They were sitting in her study, a room filled with books and screens and artifacts from across the galaxy. "You have been uncomfortable since you arrived." "I am a communications officer," Daniel replied. "I belong in a small room with broken equipment, not in a palace with a queen. And yet here you are. And yet here I am." He smiled slightly. "We keep having this conversation because you keep trying to leave and I keep asking you to stay." She set down a document she had been reading. "Tell me honestly, Daniel, do you want to go?" Daniel thought about the question. He thought about his ship, his small room, his boring job. He thought about the coffee machine that never worked properly, and the captain who barely knew his name. Then he thought about the past 3 weeks. The conversations with Serafina. The things he had learned about the galaxy. The way she listened to him like his words actually mattered. "No," he admitted. "I do not want to go. But I do not understand why I'm here. Then let me explain." Serafina stood and walked to a window that looked out over the capital city. Towers of crystal and light stretched toward the purple sky, beautiful beyond anything Daniel had ever imagined. "When I was a child, my mother told me that the hardest part of being queen is not making decisions. It is finding people who will tell you the truth. Surely you have advisors for that." "I have hundreds of advisors. I have generals and diplomats and scholars and priests. They are all very smart and very experienced and very eager to tell me what they think I want to hear." She turned to face him. "Do you know what they said about my behavior at the coronation?" "I can imagine. They said it was a brilliant political move. They said I was showing the galaxy that the Volanthi are not slaves to tradition. They said I was reaching out to humanity to strengthen our alliance." She laughed bitterly. They could not believe that I was simply scared and reached out to the first person who seemed honest. "That is their job, I suppose, to find meaning in what you do. And that is exactly the problem. They find meaning in everything, even when there's none. They turn my accidents into strategies and my mistakes into plans. They never just tell me when I am wrong." Daniel considered her words. "And you think I will tell you when you are wrong?" "I think you already have. Several times, in fact." She smiled. "Yesterday, when I suggested increasing taxes on the outer colonies, you said it was a terrible idea that would cause rebellion within 5 years. I may have used different words. Your exact words were, 'That is the kind of idea that sounds smart in a palace and looks stupid from space.' No one has spoken to me like that since my mother died." Daniel felt his face grow warm. "I apologize. I should have been more respectful. No, you should not have." She walked toward him and sat down in the chair across from his. "Daniel, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. I want you to stay here, not as a guest, but as my advisor. I want you to sit in my meetings and tell me when my plans are stupid. I want you to remind me what the galaxy looks like from outside this palace. You want me to be your communications officer. In a way, yes. You would communicate the truth to me when everyone else is too afraid to speak it." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his life, about all the paths that had led him to this moment. He thought about the teacher he had wanted to be and the soldier he had become. He thought about home and what that word actually meant. "I have conditions," he said finally. "Name them." "First, I will not lie to you. Ever. Even when the truth hurts. Even when you do not want to hear it. That is exactly what I want. Second, I will not pretend to be something I am not. I am a human. I think like a human. I will make mistakes because I do not understand your culture or your history. You cannot punish me for those mistakes. Agreed. Third, I will not stay forever. Someday I will want to go home. When that day comes, you must let me go without argument. Serafina was quiet. Daniel could see that this condition troubled her. But finally, she nodded. I agree to your conditions, Daniel Carter. And I have one condition of my own. Name it. While you are here, while you serve as my advisor, you must promise to be honest, not just with me, but with yourself. If you are unhappy, tell me. If you need something, ask. Do not suffer in silence because you think it is not your place to speak. Daniel extended his hand in the human fashion. We have a deal. Serafina took his hand and shook it. Her grip was firm, her skin cool and smooth. We have a deal. And so began Daniel Carter's new life as an advisor to the Queen. The first months were difficult. Daniel attended meetings where he understood nothing. He sat through dinners where the food was still alive. He tried to learn a language that had sounds humans could not physically make. Every day, he felt stupid and lost and completely out of place. But slowly, things began to change. The other advisors, who had first looked at him with suspicion and contempt, started to seek his opinions. The generals asked what humans would do in certain battles. The diplomats asked how humans would negotiate certain treaties. And the Queen, more and more, turned to him before making important decisions. You have a gift, she told him one evening. You see things that we cannot see because you are not blinded by our history. You ask questions that we stopped asking 1,000 years ago. I ask questions because I do not know anything. That is exactly the point. Knowledge can be a prison. Sometimes the best solutions come from those who do not know what is supposed to be impossible. On the anniversary of his arrival, Daniel received a message from Admiral Chun. We have received reports about your situation, the message said. The Earth Council is concerned about a human holding such influence over an alien ruler. They are considering ordering you to return. Daniel read the message 3 times. Then he walked to the Queen's study and showed it to her. What will you do? She asked after reading it. I do not know. If they order me to return, I must obey. I am still a member of the fleet. And if I offered you Volanti citizenship, you would be free of their orders. Daniel shook his head. That would make things worse. They would see it as betrayal. They would say you had corrupted me. Serafina was quiet for a moment. Then she stood and walked to her communication screen. Let me speak to your Admiral Chun. Your Majesty, I do not think... Trust me. She placed the call. 30 seconds later, Admiral Chun's face appeared on the screen. Her eyes went wide when she saw who was calling. Queen Serafina. This is unexpected. Admiral Chun, I understand you are considering recalling Lieutenant Carter. That is correct. There are concerns about his position in your court. Then let me ease those concerns. Lieutenant Carter serves as a bridge between our peoples. Through him, I learned to understand humanity. Through him, you gain access to the inner workings of my government. He is not a spy or a traitor. He is a diplomat in the truest sense of the word. Admiral Chun was quiet for a long moment. And what does Lieutenant Carter think about this? Serafina turned to Daniel. He stepped forward so the Admiral could see him clearly. I want to stay, Admiral. Not because I have been bribed or corrupted, but because I believe I can do more good here than I ever could fixing broken radios on a ship. I can help build something new between our peoples. Something that might matter long after I am gone. The Admiral studied him through the screen. Then, slowly, she nodded. Very well. You may stay, Lieutenant. But remember where you come from. Remember who you serve. I serve humanity, Daniel said. I just do it from a different chair now. The call ended. Serafina turned to Daniel with a smile. Welcome to the court, Daniel Carter. Officially, this time. And for the first time since he had arrived, Daniel felt like he truly belonged. 1 year after Daniel Carter became an advisor to the Queen, the Empire began to shake. It started with small things. Protests in the outer colonies, angry speeches in the Imperial Council, letters and messages calling the Queen a traitor to her people. At first, Serafina dismissed them as the complaints of those who feared change. But as the weeks passed, the problems grew worse. The traditionalist faction is growing, General Malik reported during the morning meeting. He was an old Volanthi, his silver skin faded to gray, his eyes tired from centuries of war. They now control 30% of the council. They are calling for your removal. Let them call, Serafina said calmly. The council advises. They do not rule. They control the military budget, Your Majesty. Without their support, we cannot pay our soldiers. The room fell silent. Daniel watched the faces of the other advisors. Most of them looked afraid. Some of them looked thoughtful in a way that made Daniel uncomfortable. After the meeting, he found Serafina alone in her study, staring out the window at the city below. They are planning something, he said without introduction. I know. General Malik was lying. I could see it in his face. He was testing you, seeing how you would react to threats. Serafina turned to face him. She looked tired, more tired than he had ever seen her. The traditionalists believe I am destroying the Empire. They think my reforms are weakening us, that my friendship with humanity is a betrayal of Volanthi values. And what do you think? I think change is always painful. I think those who have power will always fight to keep it. I think my mother's generation built an empire on fear, and now that I am trying to build one on hope, they do not know how to accept it. Daniel moved closer to her. What do you want me to do? What you always do. Tell me the truth. The truth is that you are in danger. Real danger. I have spent this year watching your advisors, listening to their conversations, reading their messages. At least half of them would prefer a different ruler on the throne. And General Malik? He is the most dangerous of all. He has the respect of the military. If he decides to move against you, many soldiers will follow him. Serafina was quiet for a long moment. And what would a human do in my situation? Daniel thought about history. He thought about the leaders who had faced similar challenges, the ones who had survived and the ones who had fallen. He thought about what made the difference between victory and defeat. A human would strike first, he said finally. A human would find evidence of conspiracy and use it to destroy the enemies before they could act. A human would not wait for the knife to reach their back. You are asking me to arrest my own people based on suspicion. I am asking you to survive. There is no honor in dying for principles that your enemies will throw away the moment you are gone. The Queen turned back to the window. Below, the city continued its normal life, unaware of the storm gathering above. Find me evidence, she said quietly. Real evidence. Something I can use. I will need access to the communication networks. Complete access. You will have it. Daniel spent the next 3 months digging through the secrets of the Empire. He used every skill he had learned as a communications officer, finding hidden messages in normal signals, breaking codes that were centuries old, tracing money that flowed through 100 different accounts. What he found was worse than he had imagined. General Malik was not just planning to remove the Queen, he was planning to kill her. The conspiracy included 17 high-ranking military officers, 9 council members, and dozens of lower officials. They had weapons stored in secret locations. They had loyal soldiers positioned throughout the capital. They had even chosen a date for their attack, the anniversary of the Queen's coronation. Daniel brought his evidence to Serafina on a night when the Ploidy, 2 moons of the Volanthi homeworld, were both full in the sky. This is certain? She asked after reviewing the files. Yes, I have recordings. I have financial records. I have testimony from 3 conspirators who did not know they were being watched. General Malik served my mother for 200 years. He was at my birth. He taught me to ride the sky serpents when I was a child. And now he wants to put you in a grave. Serafina closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there was steel in her gaze. Then we must stop him. The arrests happened at midnight, 2 days before the coronation anniversary. Teams of loyal soldiers, handpicked by officers that Daniel had personally checked, moved through the capital in perfect coordination. General Malik was taken from his bed. The council members were found at a secret meeting, planning their final moves. The weapons were captured before they could be used. Not a single shot was fired. Daniel watched the trials from a private booth, away from the crowds and the cameras. The evidence was presented. The conspirators tried to deny everything, but the recordings were clear. The documents were real, and one by one, they confessed. General Malik was the last to speak. I did this for the Empire, he said, his voice proud even in defeat. I did this because our queen has forgotten what we are. She has brought aliens into our councils and foreign ideas into our traditions. She has weakened us when we should be strong. Serafina stood from her throne. The hall fell silent. You did this for power, she said calmly. You dressed your ambition in the clothes of duty, but underneath, you are just a man who could not accept a woman telling him what to do. You cannot accept that the galaxy is changing, that the old ways are dying, that strength comes from adaptation, not from stubbornness. She walked down from her throne until she stood before the general. Even bound and defeated, he was taller than her. But she did not seem small. I sentence you to exile, she said. You will spend the rest of your days on the outer rim, far from the empire you claim to love. You will watch from a distance as we build something new, something better, something that will last long after your bones have turned to dust. The general was led away. The other conspirators received similar sentences. When the hall was empty except for her guards, Serafina called for Daniel. You saved my life, she said when he approached. I did my job. No, you did more than that. She reached out and took his hand. You could have used this evidence to make yourself powerful. You could have traded it to the traditionalists for money or position. You could have sold it to other species who would benefit from chaos in our empire. Instead, you gave it to me without conditions, without demands. I made you a promise, Daniel said simply. I said I would tell you the truth. This was part of that truth. And I made you a promise too. I said I would not let you go. She squeezed his hand. I meant it, Daniel. Not as a queen to an advisor, but as a friend to a friend. You are the first person who has seen me as I truly am and stayed anyway. I do not know how to thank you for that. Daniel looked at her. This queen of an ancient empire, this ruler of 40 star systems, this woman who still sometimes looked like a scared girl pretending to be brave. You do not need to thank me, he said. Just keep being the queen I know you can be. Keep changing things. Keep building bridges. Keep proving that hope is stronger than fear. Is that what humans believe? That hope is stronger than fear. It is what I believe. And it is what I have seen you prove again and again. Outside, the first light of dawn was touching the crystal towers of the capital. A new day was beginning, and for the first time in months, Daniel felt like they might actually survive to see many more. Stay with me, Serafina said softly. For how long? For as long as you are willing. For as long as we have work to do. She smiled, and even after everything they had been through, her smile still had the power to make Daniel forget his fear. I have a feeling that we are just getting started. And looking at the Queen, at the city, at the galaxy stretching out before them full of danger and possibility, Daniel knew she was right. 5 years had passed since Daniel Carter chose an empty seat at a coronation ceremony. The galaxy had changed in those 5 years, more than it had changed in the 5 centuries before. The alliance between humanity and the Volanthi Empire had grown from a careful friendship into something that historians would later call the Great Bridge. Trade flowed freely between human and Volanthi worlds. Scientists from both species worked together on projects that neither could have attempted alone. Military officers trained side by side, learning from each other's strengths and covering each other's weaknesses. And at the center of it all stood Queen Seraphina Vale and her human advisor, Daniel Carter. They were on the observation deck of the new Joint Space Station, a massive structure that hung between the stars like a monument to cooperation. Through the windows, they could see ships of all sizes moving in and out of the docking bays. Human vessels with their sharp angles, Volanthi ships with their flowing curves, and now, increasingly, hybrid designs that combine the best of both traditions. "We did this," Seraphina said quietly. "We actually did this." Daniel smiled. "You did this. I just helped a little. You helped more than a little. Every time I wanted to give up, every time I thought the opposition was too strong, you were there to remind me why we started. You were there to tell me the truth, even when the truth was that I was being an idiot. I believe my exact words were acting against your own interests. Same thing." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the ships come and go. Daniel was older now, approaching 40 Earth years. His hair had streaks of gray, and there were lines around his eyes that had not been there when he first arrived. But he stood straighter than he used to, spoke with more confidence, moved through the galaxy like a man who had finally found his place. "I received a message from Earth this morning," he said eventually. Seraphina turned to look at him. "And the Council wants to make me an official ambassador. No more pretending I am just an advisor. They want to acknowledge what I have become. That is good news, is it not?" "It is, but it also means things will change. Ambassadors have protocols, responsibilities, expectations. I will not be able to speak as freely as I have been." Seraphina reached out and took his hand, a gesture that had become natural between them over the years. "Then I will simply have to give you a higher title. Chief Advisor to the Crown, my personal voice in all matters of human affairs. Someone who speaks not for Earth, but for the Alliance itself. You cannot just make up titles. I am the Queen. I can do whatever I want." Daniel laughed, a sound that came easily now after years of learning to relax. "And what would this title require me to do?" "The same thing you have always done. Tell me the truth. Challenge my assumptions. Remind me that the galaxy is bigger than my empire and older than my traditions." She squeezed his hand. "Be my friend. I think I can manage that." They were interrupted by a young Volanthi officer who approached with a bow. "Your Majesty, the delegations are assembled. They are waiting for the announcement." Seraphina nodded and turned to Daniel. "Ready?" "For what?" "You will see." They walked together through the corridors of the station, past windows that showed the endless beauty of space, past groups of humans and Volanthi working side by side as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Daniel had grown used to these sights, but he still felt a small thrill of wonder every time he saw them. The main assembly hall was packed with representatives from dozens of species. Not just humans and Volanthi anymore, but others who had seen what the Alliance could do and wanted to be part of it. There were the Kelani, with their crystalline bodies that sang when they moved. There were the Vor, whose 3 brains made them the finest mathematicians in the galaxy. There were even a delegation of Grundish, a species that had been enemies of the Volanthi for centuries, but had recently signed a peace treaty. Seraphina took her place at the center of the raised platform. Daniel stood beside her, where he had stood for 5 years now. close enough to whisper advice, but far enough to show respect for her authority. "Friends," Seraphina began, her voice carrying through the hall, "we have gathered today to mark a new chapter in our history. For too long, the species of this galaxy have lived in fear of each other. We have built walls instead of bridges. We have competed instead of cooperated. We have seen difference as threat instead of opportunity." She paused, and Daniel could see the fire in her violet eyes. The same fire he had glimpsed on the day of her coronation. "But 5 years ago, I made a choice. I sat down next to a human I had never met, and I asked him to help me see the galaxy with new eyes. He taught me that fear is not the answer. Hope is the answer. Trust is the answer. Reaching out across the darkness and finding a hand reaching back." Seraphina turned to Daniel. "Would you like to say something?" Daniel had not expected this. He had not prepared a speech. But looking at the assembled beings, at the faces of species that had been strangers 5 years ago and were now partners, he found the words coming naturally. "I was nobody," he said. "I want you all to understand that. I was a communications officer on a small ship, attending a ceremony I did not want to attend, sitting in a seat I should not have chosen. I had no power, no importance, no plan." He looked at Seraphina, at the queen who had changed his life. But the queen saw something in me that I did not see in myself. She saw that ordinary people, people without titles or armies or ancient bloodlines, can still make a difference. She saw that the future is not built by the powerful alone. It is built by everyone, together, one choice at a time. He turned back to the crowd. "Humanity has a saying, 'The stars do not care who you are. They shine on everyone equally, the mighty and the weak, the ancient and the young.' But I think we can add something to that saying. The stars remember what we do. They remember when we reach out in friendship instead of striking out in fear. They remember when we build instead of destroy. They remember when we choose hope." He gestured at the window behind him, at the endless field of light that stretched beyond imagination. "In 1,000 years, when all of us are dust, the stars will still be there. And they will remember this moment. They will remember that humans and Volanthi and Kalani and Vor and Grundish and all the others came together and said, 'We can do better. We can be more. We can reach for the light instead of running from the dark.'" The hall was silent. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started with the human delegation, but it spread quickly, each species joining in with whatever gesture their culture used to show approval. The Kelani sang. The Vor tapped their 3 hands together. The Grundish stomped their feet in a rhythm that shook the floor. And in the middle of it all, Queen Seraphina Vale took Daniel Carter's hand and held it high. Later, when the ceremony was over and the delegations had departed, they found themselves once again on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "That was quite a speech," Seraphina said. "I did not plan it. The best speeches never are." Daniel was quiet for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened since he sat down in that empty seat. The fear and the hope, the danger and the triumph, the long nights of doubt and the bright mornings of possibility. "I never thanked you," he said finally. "For what?" "For sitting down next to me. For seeing something in me that I could not see. For giving me a chance to be more than I thought I could be." Seraphina smiled, and in the starlight, she looked as young as she had on the day of her coronation. "You do not need to thank me, Daniel. You have already given me everything I could ask for. And what is that? A friend who tells me the truth. A partner who walks beside me through the storm. A reminder that the future is not something to be feared, but something to be built." She turned to face him fully. "That is worth more than all the crowns in the galaxy." They stood together as the stars wheeled around them, 2 people from different worlds who had found each other by chance and held on by choice. The galaxy was vast and dangerous and full of unknowns, But for this moment, standing side by side, they were not afraid, because they had hope. And hope, as Daniel had learned, was the most powerful force in the universe. The end.